this is the start of just building that foundation to move forward on an effort really to put the frosting on the cake. We baked a beautiful cake here. What a project. And now it's just time to hopefully finish it up and do so in a really good way. So I think with that said, Wendy, would you like to kind of lay the foundation for today's meeting and give us an idea of what we're going to try to accomplish?
You bet, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much. So I think today's going to be a fun day. We thought we would start, Suzanne and I, of doing a tour of the space that is included in this project. We won't go up all 4 floors of the Capitol, but as we work our way over to the Judicial Learning Center, we'll kind of tour our way there. And then at each stop, as we've talked to the groups, Judicial Learning Center will also include Edie Troutwine, even though she's not with the Supreme Court anymore, but because she was really instrumental in putting that project together, she's agreed to come over with Matt Swift. We'll lead you on a tour of that facility. We have a hour scheduled at each facility, not only for you to actually see the exhibits, but to start having an understanding. You know, I think we can all think in our minds, what does it mean when we've seen an exhibit? But for you as a committee to start looking at things that you like, kind of get the creative juices flowing a little bit. And then the folks at each place will also tell you a little bit more about, you know, what does it take to put these together? What's their life cycle? What do they require for maintenance? And just give you a picture of, I guess, what you're getting yourself into a little bit, as well as I think that will help you all as a group when an interpretive designer's on board to start being able to have a little more shared understanding of, hey, remember when we saw that at Judicial Learning Center, or I liked this, but it would be great if we could do mobile technology with it. You know, so the real idea of today is just to start really getting ideas flowing and get a better understanding once these are built. And I'm always getting very good advice from museum staff and tourism. Once they're built, it's not just you walk away and they're done. They require active maintenance. If they have technology in them, they invariably, you know, things break and they become stale after a certain amount of time, and they require staffing, frankly, is part of the discussions today. So after Judicial Learning Center, Kevin Ramler and Sarah Needles from State Parks will lead us through State Museum. We will then, Suzanne has arranged for anybody who wants, we have a state motor pool van to go down to the Southeast Wyoming Visitor Center, and Diane Schober and her group will lead us down there. And then we thought, okay, how do we efficiently get everybody over to Laramie? So with the permission of the co-chairman, we have arranged for a working lunch at Southeast Wyoming Visitor Center that tourism has arranged for. And that way we kind of keep everybody together. And then I know some of you are leaving from Laramie, so there'll either be a motor pool van if you want to ride over to Laramie to the Gateway Center, or if you want to take your own vehicle over there. We will end the day. There's foundation staff have really made a lot of accommodations with Ryan. I think they're very excited to host you over at the Gateway Center today. End the day with, you know, some of your observations, some of your next steps, some we don't have a formal agenda at that point, and it's not actually formal action because we're just ending the tour there. But we do want to give you a little bit of an update on the procurement process for an exhibit designer and next steps on that.
Wendy, thanks. Well done. Just committee to remind ourselves of what this is all about. We really have what I hope will be a collective effort on the part of the executive branch and the legislative branch to do everything we can here around the Capitol complex, you know, to build the dream. So we have a great expertise to draw from. You alluded to that, Wendy, and I think it's going to be a fun day. Just get started thinking about what we need to do and what we want to do here in the People's House. So comments as we get started today.
Mr. Chairman, I may just jump in and just
Co-chair.
thank staff for coordinating today. And even though there is a small number of us. It takes a tremendous amount of coordination. And I think most of us have been to most of the places that we're visiting, but we've never had an opportunity to synthesize it in the context of this project. And I'm really, really excited. So thank you for all of your work to coordinate and just I'm sure no matter what today, it's not snowing. So there's a good thing to start with. No matter what, it's going to be a great day. So thank you very much for coordinating it. Well, it wasn't snowing on I-80, was it?
Madam Chairman, thank you. You know, it's hard not to think back, and I'm looking over at Representative Nicholas. We started some of these conversations way back when we were visioning even getting started to renovate this beautiful house. And I can remember the educational pieces, and the superintendent was in on that. And we were, it's pretty enjoyable to drive down this morning and think about, hey, we've got a chance now to bring this thing home. And hopefully, and I really believe it'll happen, I think we can pull this all together and do a great job and take something really worthwhile to our colleagues in the legislature and all of our folks in the executive branch. So anything else? Committee comments as we get started? Mr. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you. Wendy, could you just give us a rough outline of what money is out there, what the projected costs were? Kind of give us a general background before we kick off this thing, walking down around the Capitol.
Thanks for that, Representative.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Nicholas, absolutely. So there, as you all know, the conceptual plan has been designed. And at that time, it was about a $4 million ask. That summary material that Ryan sent back out to you gives a breakdown of those costs, the design costs versus fabrication costs. At that time, it did include a rather healthy contingency. However, what they did not contemplate at that time was a wayfinding package as part of the interpretive plan. And it's become very obvious the last couple of years in this building that code required signage is not sufficient to help people navigate this area, especially. In addition, that initial costs were developed 6 years ago. And obviously there's been 6 years of inflation, and there's been, I don't know if Suzanne has any more insights on this, but costs of everything have gone up in the last year. And so we do need an updated cost estimate. So that $4 million figure is a ballpark right now. Joint Appropriations Committee had a joint conference committee. There was a $4 million ask on the part of JAC. And when the dust settled on the CapCon bill, we ended up with that's a $2 million appropriation at this point in time. And so at the last meeting, you as a committee did indicate that you would like to see under the conceptual plan, the $4 million would be considered full scope. And as we walk through on the tour, we can talk again about what full scope is, as well as what would be considered a higher technology or higher interactive option.
And
Representative, go ahead.
thank you. And that doesn't include ongoing costs. It doesn't include personnel. That's just getting the
Yes.
sticks put together.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there are no operational costs, maintenance agreements, or staffing to talk about tour programming itself. Any of the pieces that would be utilized for students and tour groups to come in, those costs are not included in this. This is pure fabrication, installation. It may not even contemplate if there were any construction changes that are needed. We hope those would be minimal because the project did use the low voltage and electrical plans developed during conceptual design.
How much of that included patinaing the statues, that type of thing?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Nicholas, that is actually a really great point. And this is something that we've started taking some notes of some different items that members have brought up. The statues in 2015 that are currently in the extension were outside at the time of this conceptual design. So there was not really much contemplation of how those would fit in the interpretive plan themselves. State Museum staff, 2019 provided the oversight group with costs to restore and conserve both the Esther Hobart Morris statue and the Chief Washakie statue. And they're in the process of updating those figures as well. And those costs we will also bring to you as a committee and to the interpretive designer for inclusion in this project, if you so desire.
So Wendy, as we go along, I'm assuming that we can count on some help. Some of this we can do ourselves. That's part of what we're going to be sorting out. Like have that correct. In other words, state construction and some other folks, I'm hopeful that they can play in and help. And so any thoughts on that front?
Mr. Chairman, Suzanne Norton, State Construction Department. It's my understanding that the entirety of the contracting and managing of the funds as the committee desires falls on state construction. And so, yes, we're here for that and, have experience in various projects of this kind to be able to help. Absolutely. But to that end, Wendy has done an enormous amount of lifting on our initial drafts of the RFQ. And we look forward to talking to you about that a little bit later.
Thank you for that. And I apologize. I didn't ask that question very well. I guess obviously it does fall on state construction to help us through all the bid process and the work, on the RFQ, all of that.
Mr.
I'm
Chairman.
just hopeful that we can do some of the work ourselves, everything from electrical to whatever. So we'll have to sort that through as we go.
Mr. Chairman, yes.
And Mr. Chairman, I know we're cutting into tour time, but it might just go ahead and make sense now to give you just a quick update on the RFQ process. And Suzanne could start that because it does get into the funding question and when that number needs to hit the budget process. And then maybe since we're streaming now and this is the part that is captured as part of the public meeting, maybe I think we can get through in about 20, 30 minutes to get over to Judicial Learning Center with the tour area. So it might make sense just to go ahead and give you just a quick brief overview of where we're at with that, because I think it fits into your funding question.
I think that would be really helpful. Wendy, thank you. Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, so Wendy and I had quite a few discussions along with the other staff here from other agencies as well as UW on their thoughts on procuring this interpretive planner and wayfinding planner. And where our scope, it has a pretty good conceptual design, but it's really not defined the content, the number of signs and so on. It's a little bit hard at this point to have a proposal that would be all encompassing. So at this point, very similar to designing a renovation of a capital, you truly just want someone who's truly qualified. And so we've decided to go ahead with a request for qualifications and then define, or we think that that's the best path that we're recommending for your approval to select somebody based on their qualifications and synergy with us as a group. And it will have defined and then the anticipated scopes that will be added as we know more about the project. For example, when we hired the design team for the Capitol, the Hirschler and the renovation of the extension was not envisioned to be what it is today. And that evolved as the scope was defined. And so our first piece will be developing a cost estimate for the conceptual that we'll be able to bring forward for funding requests early. And then I don't know if Wendy, you wouldn't mind chiming in on those details.
You bet, Mr. Chairman. And so what the RFQ would look like would be basically awarded to the qualified designer in chunks, essentially. And the first chunk would be meeting with all of you in a charrette format of doing some visioning sessions, making sure that the conceptual design is in fact for both scope and types of exhibits, the interactivity of exhibits is where you want to go. They don't need to at that point get fully in design because they're basically for costing purposes looking at, lineal feet of exhibits, and they're able to provide you with a pretty good cost estimate based on that. Then that scope of work would go to JAC with a cost estimate while they continue to meet with you and further develop the actual content for the exhibit. So that would be another phase of work awarded. And then they would develop design documents and what are called fabrication documents, or if you thought of them as construction documents. And then you would, as a committee, have another choice if you're satisfied with their work to go ahead and amend their contract to do the actual fabrication or oversee the fabricator as a sub under them, and installation of the exhibits. So to Treasurer Meyer's point, it slows the process down a little bit because what we were originally looking at is a proposal of awarding everything based on conceptual design. Obviously, we wouldn't have at that point known what your desires for content were. And so this allows the work to be phased, but allows continuity throughout the project if you're satisfied with the work of the designer.
So Wendy, thanks for that. Thank you, ladies, both. I just wanted to let the committee know that Co-Chairman Balo and I have both been on the telephone with both of our departments and kind of gave a thumbs up for this RFQ effort, and really appreciate you guys getting started on that because we have hit the ground running. We're trying to get up to speed in a hurry so that we can at least hit a time frame that would fit for Chairman Nicholas and the rest of the Appropriations Committee with something. Chairman Balo, any additional comments on this front? I think it feels like the right way to go, committee, and unless there's tremendous heartburn and we want to dive off the board and see how deep the water is without even getting qualifications. So
thank you. Well, I really appreciate you just talking about the time that we've spent with our staff, talking about the RFQ and sort of the nuanced and stark differences between the RFP and the RFQ. And really what it boils down to is that we're not sure which questions to ask to solicit the best proposals. So an RFQ allows us that opportunity to just slow walk it a little bit more and really puts us more in the driver's seat to make more decisions as we go along. And so for that, I just really, appreciate, I guess, the wisdom of the small group that you have pulled together that I know is doing work in the background that then informs the chairs. And then we can have these great discussions and make the very best decisions as a committee that we can. So, again, just kind of, frankly, I have not worked directly with an RFQ, and just again, that nuanced door that it opens for us to make more decisions, I think is really important to point out.
having spent quite a bit of time, thank you, Madam Chairman. I have spent a lot of time, not only on SBC, but school facilities for a long time. So really have great comfort that state construction will be deeply involved and alongside. So Wendy, additional thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman, I just want to note Suzanne has been so helpful in this because she really has guided this idea of an RFQ, because when we started on RFP, it's like, oh no, did the original conceptual plan contemplate how many square feet, how many lineal feet? And, even just trying to get to all of that, how many signs are we looking at? Not the content that you would be developing, but just trying to get that out there so someone can give you a reasonable price. We were going to slow the entire process down for you. And so I think Suzanne had great advice to say, hey, let's just really, once we award the contract, that contract can be amended, and the RFQ allows for those scopes of work to be contracted for. The last piece, and we've got about 20 minutes to do this tour, is we did think it makes sense for a couple members of the subcommittee to sit through the selection process. That would be both a final review of the RFQ as well as to review the submittals that we receive and interview candidates. And so I don't know if you'd like to make that decision now as co-chairman, or if you'd like to think about it and and handle that later. It's totally up to you.
So what's the timing on it? On how far along are we in drafting the RFQ? When's it going to go out?
Suzanne, any thoughts about when this is going to take place? The representative is alluding to the fact that things get really busy in the fall. And so just about when is this going to hit? If
Mr. Chairman, Representative, we do have the RFQ pretty much at a stage where it's ready for review by the selection group. And then once it's approved and put on public purchase, we would hope to give the responding firms about a month to be able to put something together. Was that correct?
I missed that last little piece. What's your thoughts, Suzanne? With
So
it would-
once the RFQ is approved by the selection committee and published, we would hope to give it 30 days or so on the street before the proposals or the statements of qualification are due.
So ballpark, if we could convene a little subgroup to help,
If we could
we
have it
might be
approved in
looking
a
first
week.
week of October that we could begin to visit with some folks about helping us.
What do you anticipate once you get the RFQ out? Then you'll have a selection process over the top few bidders, and they're going to have to present something. I'm just curious what we can anticipate they're going to need to review in order to make proposals to us. Just, we put it in kind of a timescape.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, yes, we have a timetable listed and we would do a short list and then we have the option to interview, not necessarily required. And with today's technology and everybody's familiarity, we think that would be a little bit easier to arrange than it typically is. So within a week or so of a short list, we think we could request the interviews happen. And sometimes it takes up to 30 days to go to contract, but honestly, with the Capital Square project, we have help with the AG's office and so to move contracts through pretty fast. So it wouldn't take too much.
So
I'm just trying to
Representative
work-
Nicholas, yeah, go
I'm
on.
working backwards in my head.
Yeah.
It'd be
same.
nice to have a number,
December
Be a hard
3rd is
number.
our target date to have the number.
which is when,
December 3rd.
For and that's for the contractor to have a number to you as a committee, correct? And so the process now is we're about ready for review for an RFQ. So whoever the selection committee, subcommittee members end up being, there would be very quickly a review process. That shouldn't take very long. Then it would be on public purchase till the about the end of September. The qualifications were due at the very end of September, and then we only gave the selection committee on this timeline about a week to review and then pre-notification to those submitters that they needed to be ready as soon as we were to do an interview. So even we don't give them then another week to schedule an interview. So we're trying to tighten the timeline there. So interviews, as I recall, would be, I think around October 4th through 8th is my recollection on that. And concurrently to that, the way we've written the RFQ, and we've done this on a few other products, is if you are shortlisted, you are expected to already have the Secretary of State, Workforce Services, all the documentation that you're required to contract with the state of Wyoming, as well as in parallel, we would be working on a draft contract for those shortlisted firms to review so that that contract could be signed in an expectation of the work start shortly after notification of the firm to proceed.
So Wendy and Suzanne, when we talk about December 4th or December 3rd, is that to meet to meet a timeline that would be all right in terms of going to appropriations? Is that the idea? And I'm looking over at Representative Nicholas. Is that going to give time for the Appropriations Committee to feel okay about what we've been up to? Can we present something at that time? And
what do we anticipate having on December 3rd?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Nicholas, on December 3rd, you would have that high level update of a cost estimate from the conceptual plan and probably some initial thoughts from you as a subcommittee based on a couple of visioning charrette sessions with the designer.
So in essence, that will be a jump off point where we say we need roughly this amount of dollars to go to contract.
Yeah.
Move forward.
Here's what the committee has developed and here's where we think appropriations ought to help us go. Okay. Committee, any thoughts about timing, et cetera? I'm inclined to consider a couple of folks who could sit in with the group and get this RFQ out on the streets. There's a couple of us who live out of town. I would do my best to get here, but I'm wondering if maybe a couple of folks who live right here might be willing to sit in on another meeting. So I'm looking down at the right side of the table here. Madam Auditor, would you consider sitting in with on behalf of the committee?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to. The first week in October is messy, but yes, particularly for the initial RFQ, I'd be happy to.
Okay, and Representative Nicholas, would you be willing as well?
I can't wait.
I could tell he was excited. So thank you to both of you. And I can't speak for Chairman Balo, but I bet I am. We'll do everything we can as chairman to sit in as well. At least listen in and see what's up.
And speaking of that, I have an 11 o'clock meeting that'll last about 45 minutes to an hour, just so everybody knows. I'll have to jump off and run to that meeting.
Okay, so committee, I think that we better begin touring because we've got a lot of that to do today. And anything else before we jump and do that, Suzanne?
Mr. Co-Chairman.
Wendy? Chairman Balo.
Thank you. Just quickly, will this door be locked? I'm just thinking logistically, can we leave our bags here before will we come back? Should we take everything with us? What's best?
Madam Chair Balo, I was planning to leave my computer bag and stuff in here too, so we
Okay.
can surely lock the doors.
Perfect.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Would you put yours up closest to the door so if they take it?
We could probably put, if anyone wants, in this little,
They'll get to
Coffee
yours before
closet.
they get to ours. That'd be great.
and Mr. Chairman, Madam Co-Chairman, I think in the interest of time, because we are probably running a little late, but I'm actually glad we did this as part of the recorded portion of the meeting because the rest of the day will just be tours. So we'll probably go ahead and want to just close out this part. And then I think we can just quickly walk the space. We won't really have a whole lot of time to talk about any concepts for this space as we work our way over to the Judicial Learning Center.
And Wendy, just as a reminder, and then I'll go to Co-Chairman Balo. The public is certainly welcome at any point during the day to join in. Obviously, we have limited space on any transportation over to Laramie, but the public's welcome. So
And Mr.
Sure.
Co-Chairman Landon and Wendy, I just want to double check. Will the public comment period this afternoon at the Gateway Center be streamed as well?
Ryan?
Madam Co-Chair, it will not be streamed, but it is available for people to come and
Okay.
offer public comment at that time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You want to take?
Okay.
You want to request any public comment right now?
we certainly could. I'm looking out at the room. We would welcome any thoughts or comments from the public. Okay, let's get started. Wendy, you ready to show us around?
We're going to go ahead and we're actually going to work our way